Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing alright. Let me check my sound. Guys, just for a heads up, the reason why that gasoline link is below, at this point, if you are a regular viewer of the show, you'll probably sick of hearing me say this. And I'm sick of hearing myself say this, so I feel your pain. The channel has been demonetized entirety. So if you want to support the content through a donation, you can do so by a link at the bottom. There used to be Super Chat. Super Chat is no longer enabled, at least for a month. Supposedly, hopefully, it'll be back on in September, because I don't know how the channel continues at that point, if that's indefinite. But let's see how it goes. So I saw this conversation between Candace Owens and Eric Dyson. I gotta be honest, I didn't want to review this. I don't particularly like anybody in this picture. I don't particularly like Candace Owens. I think she's absolutely god-awful. Eric Dyson, it's not so much that I dislike Eric Dyson. Eric Dyson is just a Democrat. If the Democratic Party was further to the left, Eric Dyson will likely be further to the left. So I don't necessarily have any negative feelings per se about Dyson. I'm just not a big fan of the way Dyson talks. That's a very shallow reasoning, but if I'm being honest, that's my reason. So you can understand that me looking at this, I'm looking at three undesirables. Ari Melber. This took place on the Ari Melber show. Ari Melber is a wet envelope. That's what I see Ari Melber. So it's like, do I really want to cover this thing of three undesirables? Apparently there was fireworks on this, so I am going to cover this. What I would say is this. Democrats, beware. I'm going to try to do this in about 12 minutes. I'm going to say Democrats, be aware. Do you remember this? And before I show this part, back during World War I, I've said this before, Germany, realizing that it couldn't win a war on two fronts, meaning from Tsarist Russia and forces to the west, made the decision to essentially fund forces in Germany. I'm sorry, to fund forces in Russia, in Tsarist Russia, rebel forces, in order to, let's say, undermine and destabilize Russia. Again, understanding that it couldn't necessarily win a war on two fronts. So it sends Lenin in like a bomb. And for all intents and purposes, Lenin hits with a bomb. The Bolsheviks eventually take power. Lenin holds true to his deal, pulls Russia out of the war. Through great concession, mind you, pulls Russia out of the war. This allows Germany to focus on, let's say, the other fronts, until the United States gets involved. Germany was trying to do something similar in Mexico in order to destabilize the United States, meaning getting Mexico with funding from Germany to essentially attack America. This was one of the things that made America essentially declare war. Now, Germany was doing this back then. This was back in the 1800s. Let's move forward. Look at this. This took place in Afghanistan. This is Brzezinski. Look who gets off the airplane, and listen to why he's getting off the airplane.
U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
He urged the soldiers of God. The soldiers of goddamn God. I love that. The soldiers of God. I love the way they name things. We don't name things as well anymore. The soldiers of God. A football team named that. The soldiers of God. God, I love that. But whatever. Brzezinski, working with the United States, is trying to drag Russia or at this point the Soviet Union, into a quagmire that the United States got dragged into for Vietnam. They wanted to drag them and milk them of resources in the same way that we were milked in Vietnam. Now, the thing is, we are weaponizing these guys and we are radicalizing these guys. The soldier of God stuff. We got these guys to be more extremists in the way that they were going about their affairs, with the idea that the extremism would help them resist, you can call it the Soviet Union. Let's go further. Again, I'm going with the thread here. This idea of altering the ideologies to push back against a certain ruling hegemonic force. In the first place, it was Tsarist Russia having the environment turned over. In this case, it was Brzezinski going in, radicalizing the population, the Muslim population. Let me show you another case. Right here. This is Max Blumenthal, did amazing work on this. Listen to what the gentleman for the National Endowment for Democracy. National Endowment for Democracy is a group that the United States funds of right-wingers for all intents and purposes, that goes through and funds organizations in other countries for all intents and purposes, meddling in other elections in other countries' politics. It goes into a country, it funds certain organizations or certain groups. Those political groups are going against the leftist government. That's what it does. Listen to what the gentleman who started it says his reasoning for starting it.
Nowadays, instead of having just the CIA going around behind the scenes and trying to manipulate the process secretly by inserting money here and instructions there and so forth, they have now a sidekick, which is this National Endowment for Democracy, NED.
These words from Philip Agee, the late CIA whistleblower, were openly confirmed by Alan Weinstein, a founding member of the NED. Weinstein told the Washington Post in 1991, "A lot of what we do today was done covertly 25 years ago by the CIA."
There's a lot of reasons, I think, for Americans to promote democracy.
NED funding has almost quadrupled since the group was founded. In the past 4 years alone, it's directed at least $4 million into parties and media outfits in Nicaragua. That prompted an...
Now, Max Blumenthal, I'm going to put his video below so you can see it because it's a really good video. But the point I'm trying to get here is Ukraine and Mongolia were other countries that they essentially dumped money into and was able to change the governmental system and structure in those countries by funding opposition groups within the country itself, as opposed to using this kind of broad CIA or this kind of military toppling. I share this for a reason. And I know this is somewhat of a bit of wood to chop, but I show this because I want to get across this idea that it's not always a blunt force attack that wins. Sometimes it's this destabilization of your opponent or your enemy. And in this case, this destabilization is taking place in this kind of subtle ways. Part of the reason that the United States is flipping out over this idea of fake news and all this other stuff is because from the standpoint of the United States, this is a similar tactic that we use in other countries to destabilize those countries. To destabilize these countries. They look at it as, whoa, is the same thing happening to us? Now, take it from international politics and take it to domestic politics, to the domestic front. The same tactics work. It's not like the tactics that work in one country is somehow different in working on America. It's the same tactics work here as it works there. And the right-wingers that are doing those tactics here are also doing similar tactics in this country. But with this point, the people who they're throwing this up against is the Democratic Party. And instead of having a Korean person or a Mongolian person or somebody in Ukraine doing the talking as the mouthpiece for this right-wing groups, you have Candace Owens. And Candace Owens comes out and gives the right-wing talking points. Here's the catch. In all of these countries where there was a certain level of destabilization and everything else, it wasn't the stable country that got destabilized. It wasn't a situation where the country was perfectly normal, everybody was happy, everybody was, sniffing lilies in the summer breeze. It was chaos, war tragedy, here's this political destabilization. The destabilization worked in part because the country was already destabilized. It was this other outside force that kind of, let's say, lit the match. So yeah, Lenin was somewhat of a match for what was already taking place on the ground in that country. Afghanistan was a war zone. This, to some degree, set the match. In this particular case, we're talking about African Americans in the Democratic Party, and you have a lot of them who have started to look for other pastures. It's not just me. And in having those people starting to look for other pastures, you throw in your own bomb. Candace Owens. She's black. She's spewing Republican talking points, so you can't say she's racist. And in this case, you throw her up against Professor Eric Dyson. I hated this video. By the same token, not everything she's saying is wrong. Now, and I need to be very clear with this. And I mean that on other videos, on this video, she's spewing nonsense. And I'm going to explain why she's spewing nonsense. But I'm going to show the video. I hope my stream holds out. My stream has been very weird for the past few days. She's spewing nonsense. Professor Eric Dyson is insane. The man is a professor. He's awesome from the standpoint of his knowledge base. I don't like the way he communicates, but still, that's just an idiosyncrasy with me. That has nothing to do with him. He's fucking awesome. So I'm going to play this clip. We'll talk about it afterwards. God, this is painful to hear. But Professor Eric Dyson is saying something true in this very specific case, by the way. But her answer to this is utter lunacy. It's fucking lunacy.
To the date for a quick second.
53 years. Let me finish this. 53 years beyond the date of the voting. Let me finish this.
We'll go to
the
professor, and then we'll go back to you, Candace. Professor Dyson, you can finish, and then we'll go back to Candace.
Here we are, 53 years past the Voting Rights Act. We've seen the resurgence of an attempt to nullify and destroy that black vote. We've seen attempts to somehow circumnavigate around black political citizenry and agency. So all I'm saying is, if we're concerned about black people, we've got to be concerned about poverty, inequality, lack of access to education, plus the kinds of sorts of violence that we see directed toward black people in this country.
Great way to end the conversation. Sorts of violence has being directed toward.
Here's the thing. I like Eric Dyson. My problem is Eric Dyson's a Democrat. And I have no real belief that Democrats care about those things. I think he cares about those things. No, I don't necessarily think the party cares about those things. I think it uses those things as this kind of political thing, talking point, in order to get blacks. It's like Republicans talking about the debt. They will do things if it doesn't necessarily hurt their economic interests. So yeah, they want all of the different identities under that particular banner because in no way that hurts their economic interests. If it was a situation where those identities under those banners would hurt the financial elites that run the Democratic Party, I think you would get a different thing. But right now, capitalists love this idea of more people being able to buy their products. So there is no schism there from the standpoint of identity. But how many people were shot under Obama? Like the shootings and, the number of people who were shot under cops change under Obama as compared to under George Bush. That's not necessarily an insane talking point, and I suspect that's some kind of the reason why that particular talking point was chosen. Let's let her make her point. I guess my main point is, yes, the economic thing is a big deal, but no, that is not something that Democrats really ever tackle. There are not any big economic plans, and part of the reason why the Democratic Party is susceptible today to this language from this woman is for economic reasons. It's for economic reasons. Until Democrats deal with that, beware. I'm just saying, beware. She's right. There was a jump in the number of blacks who started to look at the Republican Party. I suspect they would prefer another party, but there are no other left parties, at least not from the standpoint of the binary thinking that's been drilled into the head of most people in society. So the other party that they look at is Republican Party. Binary thinking. Let's keep going.
Towards black people. Am I black? I'm curious if I'm black because I'm a black conservative and I am not hearing anything that is said about the fact that about 25 white Democrats assembled to kick me out of a restaurant yesterday to throw water and to throw eggs at me because I am a conservative that supports Donald Trump. The very same Donald Trump, okay? The very same Donald Trump that has not Obama. Obama did not do this. It's because President Trump has been slashing regulations and it has brought this economy to a place it has never been at, okay? We have unemployment that's an all-time low for both women. You brought up women, you brought up gays, you brought up black people. Unemployment is at an all-time low across the board. You guys refuse to acknowledge the truth that we are doing better. You want to talk about fascists? Antifa attacked me. This is an all-white gang that attacked me and attacked an all-black police force in Philadelphia, okay? And they claim to be fighting racism. How is it plausible, Professor, that you allow this to happen to your community because you've decided that because we are ideologically conservatives, you are okay with this? You're okay with the resurgence of the Democrats?
I haven't said a word.
Don't cut me off.
I haven't said a word.
You just said a lot of words.
I didn't say a word.
Actually, if somebody was counting,
This is lunacy. This is nonsense. I'm going to put the video in so you can see it for yourself. Eric Dyson makes, yes, a long-winded point using very big words and making his point. But Eric Dyson said nothing about her in what he said. And she immediately turned this to, I got beat up by Antifa, and you somehow are okay with me being beat up by Antifa. What the fuck? What the fuck? Let's let her keep going. I don't want to interrupt her. This is a line of lunacy that I don't want to get in front of.
I said nothing about you.
Now you're cutting
I said
me off,
nothing about you.
No.
I find what happened to you reprehensible, by the way.
I still have to keep it going. Candace, we're going to take a pause.
No,
Candace,
I didn't get to finish.
I'm going to let
you
you.
just went on for 5 minutes straight. You are attacking.
I'm going to let you finish, but if you're calling out the professor, I have to give him time. So Candace, go ahead.
Liberals have been attacking conservatives, and you guys say nothing about it. Blacks were attacked yesterday, okay? And they were attacked because they support Donald Trump. Black support for Donald Trump has doubled since this time last year. You guys can try to pretend that he is pushing in a racist era in this country when in fact we know the Democrats are the racists, have always been the racists. The party's never switched, and you should know this as a civil rights person. You know the history. You know the people under the hood of the KKK.
Let me respond.
Were Democrats, and the party never switched.
Candace, I'm going to give the professor a chance to respond.
You should defend what happened to me yesterday and defend our community being attacked because we support Donald Trump, because we understand that we have better economic opportunities under him than we ever had in Obama. And shame on you for spreading in Obama.
Candace, I'm going to give the professor a chance to respond.
Under his administration, he allowed the bloodshed, and Trump wanted to send the National Guard, and the Democrats stopped him.
That is stupid on steroids. Like, that's stupid on another level. Wow. And a lot of stupid at that. Eric, I'm going to let Eric Dyson respond to that. But, look, for the first point, there was a polarity shift in the parties. Like, this is somewhat common knowledge. I don't know if she knows that. Meaning, I don't know if she's a useful idiot or a political hack. I have no idea. I'm not going to make a question on it. But clearly there was a polarity shift in the party. Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act. Those were things that, at this point, I would imagine most people who are doing the political stuff know. And if she doesn't know that, she should not be out here doing this. That's the first part. The second part, Obama allowed people to be shot in Chicago, and Trump wanted to send out the National Guard. I would imagine that this is somewhat of a good talking point for people who are in a particular area who honestly don't really pay attention to politics. And they, on the cusp of this, say, hey, yeah, we really want military in our streets to do a job that either the police or the society itself is supposed to do. I find that to be somewhat ludicrous. Nevertheless, this has been the talking point that Republicans, especially her, has been pushing. I've seen her push this talking point on multiple occasions. Oh, I care about the black community so much. I care about the black community so much. I care about the economic health. Here's the thing. If you care about the economic health of the black community, You do things that benefit the economic health of the community itself. The collective itself can make decisions that is good and better for the collective as opposed to what's best for the individual. I would imagine that it does your bottom line extraordinarily well to push this thing of freedom for that network that you push this for. For the rest of African Americans, not so much. Meaning Donald Trump attacking things like clean air, attacking healthcare. Those are things that actually benefit African Americans. Imagine for the fact if you didn't, at point of service, have to pay all of this money for a bill. That would affect you greatly. That would affect you greatly. That's just one item. What about education? Meaning cutting the cost of education. You have Betsy DeVos going through with a jackhammer, cutting through regulations. Not just regulation, but making it, let's say, destroying the Department of Education. Let's say it that way. And she's making this full-throated argument that Donald Trump is working for the betterment of for people in the society, particularly for African Americans. I don't see it. Donald Trump cut taxes on the people who are making the most. We would have to believe in this trickle-down economics that once you cut taxes on the people who are making the most, that money was going to somehow trickle down. It did not. That money ended up in the pockets of the people who were making the most. The people who were fixing the lattes, taking the trash, who were doing the actual work of the society itself, didn't receive the benefits of that in the least. So she can push this narrative all she wants. The thing that is true, however, at least by polls, is that support among blacks has increased for Trump. Has increased for Trump. I've said before, Democrats, beware. I'm saying Democrats beware because I don't believe that I am completely atypical. And just to leave with a story. My wife's dad, him and I had a conversation. This was maybe last year. And he said, I couldn't bring myself to vote for a Republican. He said I couldn't do it. And I said, look, I don't blame you. You shouldn't. They're out for themselves. You have essentially a party that's out for the top 1%. That's who they're for. That's who they've always been for. That's their mandate. So no, I have no expectation at all that you would vote for a Republican. Why would you? I said, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't start looking at other parties to vote for. I voted for Jill Stein in the last election, and I was proud to do it. And he says, yeah, but, I kind of want my vote to count. I said, well, it takes a certain groundswell at a certain point to move the dial. And until you get enough people that forces the Democratic Party to either be accountable or makes another party viable, nothing changes. And so he was like, yeah, I can't see myself doing it. Do you know, I talked to my wife the other day. She had talked to her dad. She said her dad said, I can't vote Democrat anymore. This guy has voted Democrat for 50, 60 years. And at this moment, he's saying, I can't do it. I am not atypical. And if I am not atypical, that party should be terrified. And you need to regard that question of why. And I would drill into this point of, you've gotten off on you have nowhere else to go. And you assume that argument would carry the day in perpetuity. That if we hug identity, then the other stuff wouldn't matter, meaning the economics would matter. The big social programs, the collective idea of reality, pulling people together and saying, yes, let's do something big and collective for the society itself. You push those to the side because of a small 1% that also runs your party just like it runs the Republican Party. Maybe a slightly less rapacious. The problem is that your base and the people who vote for you, that's what they want. And the rhetoric of you versus the Republicans get away with that. Candace can say this all she wants. But the rhetoric and the whole language of the Democratic Party, let's say it's the antithesis of the base. Let's say it that way. You can't get away with that from the standpoint of the Democratic Party. It goes against the philosophy of the party. So what do you do? Especially if that philosophy is going to be FDR. So yeah, you have a contingent of African Americans who've said, I'm not getting what I want out of this. They're using us and they're taking us for granted. And they're right. And the question becomes, what do you do with that? And unfortunately, because of binary thinking in this country of you only have two parties, people like Candace Owens makes this level of thinking a little bit more appealing, even though this level of thinking, when you look at it, is utter nonsense. It's nonsense. Let's see who's here. Occupy Obama, Alex Jones just getting rid of. Google, Simmer's info. Privacy being respected was a foregone conclusion. Now people are making the dumbass argument you just used, even though your privacy is more vulnerable than ever. I know what you're talking about. Jamarl loves to spend other people's money. It's not other people's money. Thomas Trainer. I would say, let's do it this way. If you've made it well in this country, you've become a billionaire, a millionaire. Great for you. Pay your fair share. Pay your fair share. I mean, because at the end of the day, that person can't make those millions without those people working for that person. Without that person doing coffee, keeping the lights on, doing the sweeping, policing the streets. Without all of those things taking place, that guy makes nothing. Pay your fair share or get out the country. It's that simple. Creative experiments. If they'd hope, yeah. Crime needs an unemployment vacuum. That's funny. I love that. I love that. I love that. She exaggerating, but she's using a base of truth. Yeah, agreed. Obama didn't do anything. The Voting Rights Act was gutted and didn't do much for victims of Hurricane Sandy or BP and Watch Occupy. Yeah. Great. That's my point. Like, this is not necessarily, if you're trying to make a case and you want to use a kernel of truth for the case, with this notion that Trump is also not going to do anything. Just being honest. This idea that Democrats are stopping Trump from doing something, it's nonsense. It's nonsense. Obama didn't do anything. Trump is just looking for some kind of hook to shear away a section of the party. Mind you, Trump doesn't need to get 90% of the black vote. If Trump gets 5% extra, what does that mean for the Democratic vote? You know what I mean? They only need to get rid of a small percentage of the black vote for Democrats to essentially be defunct as a party. Just saying. Just saying. Was a lifelong Democrat and Nevada state delegate for Bernie. After experiencing that, I say no more. Papa Onion Schiller. Yeah, right there. Right there. I'm black. DOS. Was a lifelong Democrat and Nevada state delegate for Bernie. After experiencing that, I say no more. What the Democratic Party missed was what the Republican Party missed. If you're going to treat people a particular way, people of a particular generation are going to remember that. And that it's going to affect the way they vote from then on. You've created a headwind in voting for any Democrat, regardless of the race. This is less to do about race than it does about class. I keep making that point. Candace Owens is doing this, not from a standpoint of identity, but from a standpoint of class. There's a difference in those things. Trump is going from 16% to 36% of the black vote in current polls. I don't think it's that high. I don't believe it being that high. But I do think it's higher. Let's say it's double. That's still a great amount. The gap between a corporate Democrat and Republican is that of a puddle. Yes, corporate Democrats and Greens a river. Democrat, what pollute lead and fluoride? Yeah, they would. They don't care. This would be the same person trying to explain away why they're putting lead in your water or why it's okay for lead to be in the water. They can't beat Trump in 2020 without breathing hard. All they need to do is quit politics and make room for a better alternative instead of a worse one. Yeah, right. Agreed. Absolutely agreed. Let Eric Dyson answer this before we go too far.
So, Candace, I don't want to have to talk over people, but we have to go back and forth. And Candace, we're going to have to take a pause there. Couple things. You're making a personal attack on the other guests, so
What
I have
did
to give them a
attack him
chance to
with?
respond.
Let me respond. First of all,
I
I
also
never
have to
said...
say, and Professor, I'm going to go back to you. I also have to say the topic of this discussion that we have tried and perhaps are failing on live television to discuss is Trump policy. The incident that you're referring to yesterday is not necessarily this topic.
It's a Democrat policy.
It seems like her whole strategy for this is to essentially, you could say, she's stalling for time. Like the bringing this up, the way she's talking and everything, it's just a stall for time. She doesn't want to talk about the Trump stuff. The Trump stuff for her is, you know, it looks bad for an African American to try to defend somebody who's using the N-word. So instead of having that conversation, you talk about anything else other than that. That seems to be the strategy, and Eric Dyson is caught in the middle of it. But look, well, that's kind of a side point. Whether or not this is going to be effective is a second strategy or second question. I've seen her on one or two occasions, more than one or two occasions, and I've seen her Twitter thread. It seems that she goes with this line of argument. This line of argument, apparently just self-evident, seems for her to be the most effective line of argument to people who don't necessarily know what's taking place. The question becomes, is this effective? Is this effective in that? I don't know. And by, mind you, it doesn't need to be effective to a large degree. It only need to take off a few percentage points. But the main point I want to make here is none of this gains any traction were it not for Democratic weakness. That's the point I want to make. That's the point I want to make. Makes you wonder, are all the polls such bad news for the DNC? All they feel safer in only letting the one most easily credited be reported. You mean the that particular poll? Yeah, I used that poll. I don't know about the 16% one. The one I'm talking about was the one that was a few days ago. I think it was maybe a week ago, which showed a doubling in support. Mind you, a doubling in support is still a paltry amount. But if you are getting to the point where you can convince some of Democrats' most ardent supporters that this isn't working for you and maybe you need to try something else, that's a big fucking deal. That's a big fucking deal. That said, all of it is nonsense. Like, all of it is nonsense. All of it is nonsense. A cutthroat corporatist versus a professor. Yeah. I mean, understand the goal in this was to win it. The goal in this wasn't to have a discussion. I don't care what Ari Melbourne's goal was. You want two people on the show. One person African American has to defend Donald Trump being racist. Well, what do? Are you really going to have the conversation about Donald Trump being racist, or are you going to attack the professor? In this case, she directly attacked Eric Dyson, saying that Eric Dyson was okay with her being beat up by Antifa. Why would Eric Dyson even know that she was beat up by Antifa? Why the fuck would anybody know that? I don't keep track of Candace Owens. I would imagine he doesn't keep track of Candace Owens' whereabouts. She directly directed it at him. That's funny. If God existed, the earth would have opened up and swallowed both Candace Owens and Eric Dyson already. Yeah, that's funny. That's funny. It's kind of like saying, is Tylenol not solving your arm pain? Here's a chainsaw to cut your arm off. Balthazar, yeah. It's, hey, this Democrat isn't doing the job. Maybe you need to give Donald Trump a try. And it's like, but you realize that's going from shitty to a pig farm where there's rivers of shit that's going for miles. Like, I'm trying to get across, what's taking place. It's nonsense. She's attacking him in an odd way from the left and the right. But the thing is, Eric Dyson, Democrats have left themselves open for this. I'm sorry, they have. That's what it boils down to. They've just left themselves open for this. Let's see. Somebody sent a donation. Stop Jamal. Stop talking about radicalizing people against Russia, Jamal. Rachel Maddow can only organize. Stop talking about radicalizing people against Russia, Jamal. Rachel Maddow can only orgasm so hard. Oh, God. Oh, God. That's slightly disturbing. I don't know why that's disturbing to me now. So the lesser of evils again. That's what she's pushing, but it's not even the lesser of evils. The Republican Party has a modus operandi representing the top 1%. That's how it is. Now, you can attack the Democratic Party for being weak and feckless and not representing blacks. You can't say the Republican Party is going to do better. Just saying. Just saying. The video is all over YouTube. Funny that a bunch of white Antifa calling Candace a white supremacist. Oh, no way. Are you shitting me? That's wild. I gotta be honest. I've always been sketchy with this going after people stuff. I remember when, what's her name said it. Like, it's this, if you're living in Nazi, my trepidation with this is, if you're living in Nazi Germany and you see Hitler walking, do you run up to Hitler with a sign saying you're killing Jews? Or is the media going to say, hey, don't do that. You shouldn't do that. You need to let the public officials do what the public officials do, even the public officials bringing your country to ruin. At which point, does the deal that you made to operate in a society and in the guidelines of the society break down? I don't know that answer. That's what always screws with me. I don't know that answer. That happened a few days before this segment with Ari Melber. That's why I think the rhetoric is a bit more heated than usual. I see, yeah. I don't follow Candace Owens, so I don't necessarily know her comings and goings. If somebody did that because she's supporting Donald Trump is doing bad things, I'm not necessarily shocked that people would do it. Do I approve of them attacking her? No, I don't approve of her being attacked. You don't like systemic disenfranchisement? Come get open discrimination. Yeah. Look, the problem for Democrats is the argument of Obama did nothing for blacks. Again, this is not a baseless argument. You're talking about this thing of the housing market going belly up. The housing market being the part where African Americans kept most of their wealth, eviscerated. With Obama throwing his body on the lap of the banks to make sure that the banks were protected and had a safe landing. You can see a little bit of frustration in from that regard. She will be hated in some camps, but there will be other camps that accepts what she's saying. I'm just saying, Democrats need to beware. Democrats need to beware. They don't need to get a whole lot of African Americans. That's the point. You don't need a lot. You just need to shear off a few. All right. I'm going to end this. I'm putting the video at the bottom. I keep thinking about Guy McPherson. Maybe the entire Arctic should be covered in solar panels to prevent the ice from melting. The ice is already melted. There are parts of the Arctic that doesn't have any ice on it. We may be in for an iceless Arctic. Trump is shifting finances right from going out to coming in, ergo low taxes and no regulations. Yeah. I'm totally on board for that water that has some kind of chemical in it from some company that's making tons of cash. So yeah, that's what we all need. We all need more shit in the air or in the water that we drink. I've seen some of the Breaking Brown videos, but that's all I know. Yeah. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. Interesting, painful video to watch between them two. Professor Dyson is bright as can be. And in the conversations where he could elucidate and you could see this kind of clarity of thought, he's great. Even in the beginning opening of this. Crisp, clear. He does it in very big words, but does it well. versus, like you said, political operative. There, and it's funny when Melber is introducing, it's like he's written 23 books and all this other stuff, and for what's her name, it just announces so far. You know, she's a political operative from this organization. Not much to say. Case Space 97 Kea. I just call it Kea. Many of my Democrat liberal friends refuse to believe me that black Americans' dissatisfaction with the other Democrats should be concerned. Yes, you should be concerned. You should be concerned. I'm telling you, my wife's dad had been a Democrat for over 60 years. And this was the first time that he said, I can no longer vote for that party. If he's there, he's not the only one. I don't think those polls that are coming out as Rasmussen are necessarily completely right. They don't have to be completely right. But if they're showing a trend in a particular direction, I would pay them some mind. I don't think I'm that atypical. I don't think Garland Nixon is that atypical. I think they have a potential problem. So, I'm just saying. All right. I will end it here. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.